How surprised would Fernando Alonso be if, after years fighting Red Bull's dominance, he sees that his own car for 2026 could be his last big opportunity, but also his biggest risk? The story that brings us to this point does not begin in 2026. It has its roots much further back, in strategic decisions made in the shadows, in past failures, and in an excessive ambition that for years seemed to have no solid foundations. To understand why the introduction of the Honda RA626H engine is such a defining moment for Aston Martin, we have to go back to the exact point where it began its transition from being a customer team to trying to become a dominant force: the year 2021. Since that season, Aston Martin, formerly Racing Point, adopted Mercedes power units and tried to build a competitive chassis around them. During those first years, the team experienced a mix of progress and frustrations. They achieved occasional results, isolated podiums, but they never made the definitive leap. It was a structure that depended on the performance and technology of others, and that, in Formula One, condemns you to being a supporting actor. The real leap did not come with the engine, nor with the chassis, but with the arrival of a key figure: Alonso Stroll. The Canadian businessman not only bought a team, bought a narrative. He wanted to build a giant from scratch, surrounding himself with technical talent and betting on a long-term vision. He invested in infrastructure, hired high-level staff, and above all, was not afraid to think big. His son, Lance Stroll, would be one of the two pillars on the track. The other, a veteran world champion, Fernando Alonso. But there was a problem. Aston Martin's performance ceiling was limited. The dependence on Mercedes became increasingly a burden, especially as the differences between customer and factory became more visible on the track. That was the rationale behind the next big step: an exclusive alliance with Honda, with which they would form, for the first time in the team's modern history, a completely integrated unit. Engine, chassis, and design philosophy working together. Aston Martin went from being a simple midfield team with good intentions to becoming, on paper, a factory structure. The presentation of the RA626H engine was not just any event. It was a declaration of intent. Held in Tokyo with the presence of the most influential names in the paddock, it was not only a display of engineering, but a ceremony full of symbolism. Stefano Domenicali, CEO of F1, attended as a sign of institutional support for Honda's formal return. Toshihiro Maibe, president of Honda, reaffirmed the Japanese brand's commitment to a project that is not only sporting, but strategic in the energy transition of sport. And Lawrence Stroll, at the center of it all, made it clear that his goal is not to be competitive, just being a champion. However, as in any story of ambition, the contrast between what was promised and what is real never takes long to appear. Because when Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll first sat down in the simulator to experience driving the AMR26, what they found was not the dominating monster that everyone expected. It was a car that raised more questions than answers. The press did not know it immediately, but the first alarms went off within the team. How could it be that, with all that technical talent and investment, the car still didn't offer a clear competitive experience? Was it the fault of the regulations, the simulator, the engine itself? Or perhaps had they underestimated the magnitude of the challenge involved in cutting Mercedes' technical legacy? These doubts were not expressed publicly. Regarding the media, the message was unified: optimism, progress, confidence. But internally, Alonso and Stroll knew that what was coming was not a smooth transition. It was a technical war of attrition, and they would be the first to feel it. Talking about the new Honda RA626H engine is talking about a turning point in the technical history of Formula One. It is not simply an evolution of what we already had. It's a radical transformation that reconfigures how a racing car is built, managed, and driven. To understand why Alonso and Stroll emerged from the simulator with so many reservations, you first have to understand the kind of creature Honda has built, and why its risks are as great as its promises. The first thing to understand is that the RA626H engine was born under a new regulatory philosophy that eliminates one of the most complex and influential components of the hybrid era: the MGUH. This system, which allowed energy to be recovered from exhaust heat and eliminated turbo lag, was for years the difference between a winning car and a frustrated one. Teams like Mercedes and Honda invested years of development and hundreds of millions into perfecting this technology. In fact, Honda had even incorporated turbines developed by its HondaJet aviation division to optimize its MGUH, which was key to Red Bull's dominance between 2019 and 2025. But in 2026, the MGUH disappears completely. And with this, teams must face a harsher mechanical reality. There is no longer software or thermal engineering that hides the limitations of the turbocharger. Turbo lag returns like a ghost from the past, demanding new design strategies and new compromises in power delivery. And that is not a minor issue for the pilots. In the simulator, delays in throttle response are noticeable, even for experienced drivers like Alonso, who noticed how the car's behavior became unpredictable in low-speed corners. It's not just about power. It's all about confidence when stepping on the accelerator, and that's something that can't be measured in data alone. But the most challenging thing is not what was lost with the elimination of the MGUH. It is what is demanded in return. The MGUK, the unit that recovers kinetic energy during braking, has been multiplied by 3. Its maximum power goes from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts. In other words, almost half of the car's total power now comes from an electrical system that must not only recover more energy, but also know when, how, and where to release it in every corner, in every turn, in every weather and downforce scenario. Honda has developed internal software that manages more than 20,000 parameters in real time. It seems like an absurd figure, but it makes sense. Electrical energy is managed as a strategic resource, not just as a power supplement. The software must know whether to discharge electrical power in a straight line, or save it for an override, or limit its use to control the system temperature. It is a mathematical dance that requires millimeter precision, and that is still far from being polished. For pilots, this new logic completely changes the way they drive. In Stroll's words, the 2026 cars aren't that exciting, especially on fast circuits. What was once a direct connection between pilot and machine now goes through layers of algorithms and energy flow calculations. In the simulator, the sensation is not that of having a faster car. It is to have a heavier, less agile car with unpredictable power delivery. To this we must add a key detail: the battery. With so much emphasis on the electrical component, new power units require larger batteries, with greater capacity and much more complex cooling systems. Images of the Honda RA626H engine show an orange unit, noticeably bulkier than any previous generation. And that affects the weight distribution of the car, its center of gravity, and consequently, its behavior in fast corners. As if that were not enough, the power of the internal combustion engine has also been cut. From about 750 horsepower to just over 530. That is, the gasoline component is weaker than before, and depends more than ever on perfect synergy with the electrical system to maintain competitiveness. Any mistake in energy management, and the car loses performance dramatically. In the simulator, Alonso felt that disconnection. Even in long stint simulations, the balance between combustion engine and MGUK delivery felt unbalanced. It's not just a question of numbers. It's a question of sensations, of rhythm, of consistency. Alonso is a driver who needs immediate feedback from the car, and what he found in the AMR26 was a system that is still in the understanding phase, rather than mastery. And finally, there is the fuel. All F1 in 2026 will use 100% sustainable fuel. It sounds good in terms of marketing and ecology, but it introduces another layer of technical complexity. The burning of the new fuel produces a different response in the engine, changes the operating temperatures, thermal efficiency, and therefore the entire operating map of the car. Aston Martin's partner Aramco has tested this new type of fuel in F2 and F3, but its performance in F1 race conditions remains unknown. And Alonso, with more than 2 decades of experience, knows it. That is why his words, although measured, are eloquent: "There is work to do." And that phrase in this context is the diplomatic version of a warning. Fernando Alonso is, without exaggeration, one of the most technically sensitive drivers of his generation. His ability to read a car, to feel every detail of the chassis and power unit response, has made him a technical resource as valuable as any CFD or wind tunnel simulation. When Alonso comes down from the simulator and doesn't say anything during the first minutes, that is not indifference. It's analysis. It is alert. And above all, it is a way to warn that there are things that are not working. But this time it's different. Because this time, Alonso is not in a team in decline. He is in a project that promised to return him to the fight for the championship. And the problem is not that the car is slow. The problem is that, with all the talent and resources available, there are still no clear signs that he is dominant. And Alonso no longer has room to wait. He is 44 years old. This could be their last real attempt at winning a 3rd title. And every day that passes without a clear correlation between simulator and track is a day wasted. Do you think Aston Martin and Honda are up to the challenge? Or are we facing another story that will end in frustration, like so many other broken promises in the recent history of sport? Leave it in the comments what you think about all this.